History books portray the Vikings as brave navigators, intrepid warriors, and skilled traders. They are portrayed with helmets, swords, and an indomitable spirit that crossed the northern seas. But that's just the surface, the noble side of the myth. Beneath that glorious armor lies a raw, uncomfortable, and brutal world. A world where urine was a fire tool, slaves were sacrificed at funerals, and carved red teeth were the marks of a soul willing to kill or be killed. This isn't the story you see on television. It's the story that's unearthed, reeking of blood, sweat, and mud. Prepare to learn about the Vikings' dirtiest and most perverse practices, those that no one wants to tell, but that define their true essence. Before starting this video, remember to subscribe and like. For centuries, the Vikings were talked about as navigational geniuses, fierce warriors of honor, and tireless explorers. But the history that was taught omitted their darkest habits, those that were brewing far from the battlefield, in the everyday, in the dirty, in the deeply human. Imagine lighting a fire in the middle of a frozen forest, without matches, without modern tinder. The Vikings did it with a fungus called Fomes fomentarius, which they pounded, boiled, and left to dry. But the secret ingredient, and here comes the disgusting part, was human urine. They would soak it for days until the fungus absorbed the sodium nitrate, allowing it to smolder slowly like a portable ember. The smell didn't matter. It didn't matter how repulsive it was. What mattered was that it worked. That was the Viking mentality. If something helped them survive, they did it. And that logic didn't just apply to mushrooms. It applied to human life as well. In a community where every individual was expected to contribute strength, resilience, and usefulness, there was no room for weakness. Babies born with illnesses, malformations, or simply signs of fragility were abandoned. Sometimes they were left out in the open, at the mercy of the gods or the cold. It wasn't out of malice, it was out of necessity. The clan couldn't be burdened with someone who wouldn't contribute. Even gender could be a reason for exclusion. If the first child was a girl, and therefore wouldn't inherit land or bear arms, some parents simply decided not to raise her. A brutal calculation, as if every cradle were a financial gamble. And if this already seems extreme, wait until you hear what happened to warriors wounded in combat. Not all cuts received attention. Women trained as healers had a method for determining whether they were worth treating. They would prepare a broth of onions and leeks, have the wounded man drink it, and then smell his open wound. If they caught a whiff of the broth, bad news. It meant the intestines had been perforated. A death sentence. Then they would set him aside, with dignity, but without intervention. Resources weren't wasted on lost causes. In that world, compassion wasn't a priority. Functionality was. And if there was ever a conflict between two people, be they nobles, peasants, or even slaves, the duel wasn't avoided, it was ritualized. It was called the home gang. A fight with rules, but also with blood. You challenged someone publicly and had a week to face them. To refuse was to plead guilty. Even a slave could challenge a noble, and if the noble didn't show up, they were forever disgraced. Some duels ended with 3 broken shields. Others, when someone died. This wasn't chaos. It was order. An order built on the harsh logic of survival. Brutality was part of the social fabric, not a rupture of it. While television shows us Vikings with bright smiles and perfect braids, real history reveals that amidst mud, blood, and urine, a civilization was forged that lived without anesthesia. Because in their world, courage wasn't measured in words or tender gestures. It was measured in utility, in resilience, in the ability to burn like a mushroom soaked in human urine. And at that, the Vikings were masters. While the Vikings conquered lands and legends, one of the darkest secrets flourished in their shadows: the human trade. They plundered monasteries not only for their relics, but also for literate monks, valuable in slave markets in Byzantium or the Islamic world, where many were castrated to serve in palaces. Slavery was hereditary. If you were born a slave, you were property. And if your master died, you could accompany him to the grave. Funeral rituals included human sacrifice, such as the one described by Ahmad ibn Fadlan, where a slave woman was raped and murdered in public by the angel of death. This violence wasn't disorder. It was structure. And within it rose the berserkers, warriors who entered into trance-like states, roared, bit into shields, and fought like madmen. Their fury is believed to have stemmed from a hallucinogenic mushroom, Amanita muscaria, consumed before combat to eliminate fear and pain. During battle, they were unstoppable. Afterward, many collapsed, drained by their own fury. The Viking body was a tool, a symbol, and a stage of war. With carved and red-stained teeth, painted eyes, and bloodied skin, they became living manifestations of ritual terror. Every scar was a story, every alteration a declaration. Violence wasn't hidden, it was celebrated. It was devotion. It was belonging. It was power. And in that world, pain wasn't a limit, it was language. In Iceland, it wasn't just humans fighting for survival. Animals were also drawn into the ritual of brutality. One of the crudest spectacles was called estabig, a bloody duel between stallions. They would place a mare in heat nearby and lock the two males together. If they didn't attack each other ferociously enough, they would be taunted by the crowd until they bit, kicked, and tore at each other. The fight could last minutes or several hours, and didn't end until one fell wounded or dead. To modern eyes, it seems inhumane. For the Vikings, it was natural selection. The strongest deserved to reproduce. The strongest deserved to continue. That same principle permeated their bodies. Vikings didn't live in sterile, or even clean worlds. In their ancient latrines, archaeologists have found thousands of intestinal parasite eggs. Roundworms, tapeworms, invisible invaders. The regular consumption of raw meat, especially organs, facilitated these infestations. But they didn't become extinct, they adapted. Their genetics mutated over time. They developed molecular variants like alpha-1 antitrypsin, which helped combat the inflammation caused by parasites. A defense that allowed them to resist, survive, and continue functioning, even when infected. Ironically, that same mutation is linked today to respiratory diseases. The Viking body didn't forget its history, it wrote it in its genes. And as if that weren't enough, their own teeth became symbols. In tombs found in Sweden, Denmark, and England, skulls were found with precisely carved incisors, with horizontal grooves tinged with red. Blood, minerals, pigments. No one knows for sure. But the most widely accepted theory is that it was a form of intimidation. Imagine encountering a grinning warrior in the midst of combat, his teeth carved as if bearing living runes. That face wasn't just feared, it was revered. The Vikings didn't wear makeup for aesthetics. They carved themselves to convey a message. Every bodily modification, whether a scar, a dental imprint, or a genetic mutation, spoke something. There was no division between beauty and function. Their world was a stage where the body spoke. And spoke loudly. It was necessary to endure, it was necessary to impact, it was necessary to transcend. Such was life among the fjords, harsh, visceral, adaptive. They weren't simply warriors, they were architects of pain. They transformed the everyday into symbol, the repulsive into tool, the ritual into genetics. In an era where power was demonstrated not only with weapons, but with bodies marked by experience. The Vikings perfected the language of brutality. And although only buried fragments remain today, those carved bones, those red marks, continue to scream their truth from beneath the earth. Now that you've crossed this threshold of brutality, perhaps you'll look at the shining helmets and engraved shields with different eyes. Because the Vikings weren't just explorers of the world. They were also explorers of the body, of fear, of ritualized pain, and of power taken to the extreme. They were humans with a worldview that used violence as language, sacrifice as currency, and horror as a symbol of order. It's not about justifying them, but about understanding them. Because there, among carved teeth and accompanying corpses, there is something that speaks to us of what we were. And perhaps of what we still are. Welcome to the side that television doesn't show. Welcome to Norse Fury. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you in the next video.